Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. It's a great pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight, Nicola Jackson, who is a well-known artist in Dunedin. In fact, she is from Dunedin, brought up in Dunedin, but she went to the art school at Christchurch. And her topic, if I can get my tongue around it, is what is under our skin and what is on our mind from an artist's point of view. Now, you will have noticed, I'm sure, the very well-known painting of hers, which is in the foyer as you come in on the ground floor of the hospital. It's that lovely painting there, which I've often admired. So, Nicola, it's a great pleasure to welcome you tonight, and we look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. The blogs. Who are the blogs? I think we all know who they are. We know Joe, that's Joe Blogs, and there's Jane Blogs, Joe Public, and Jane Doe, typical, ordinary, average people, the neighbours. And then there is us. Look around, there's no two of us the same. My point in starting my presentation in this way is to introduce something important to the way I approach my art making practice. I almost always use representations of people to illustrate an idea. The blog's reference is my way of saying we are all very similar under the skin. Anatomical illustrations are a constant strand of inspiration, and I will show many examples of what I'm particularly inspired by. Other important strands of inspiration for my work are cabinets of curiosities. These cabinets of curiosities, also known as wonder rooms, were encyclopedic collections of objects. The word cabinet generally described an actual room, not a cabinet. In modern terminology, the contents of these cabinets of curiosities may include natural history, geology, archaeology, relics, etc., some of which were fakes. These cabinets served as entertainment as well as to inspire wonder and showcase knowledge. They aimed to capture and define new knowledge of the world. They were the precursor of the modern museum. It's almost a cliche. These cabinets of curiosities almost always had a stuffed crocodile hanging from the ceiling. Collections of interesting things is another one of my interests, like Layla at the Hair Museum in Missouri. A collector is a person who gathers, organizes, gives meaning to material objects. I'm interested to know why we collect what we collect. There's a range of connections between things, ideas, value, and meanings. The museum environment is another inspiration to me. Museums are institutions that collect, preserve, interpret, and exhibit objects of historical, cultural, scientific, or artistic importance. They are a container of something. I'm showing here particularly anatomy museums. Oh, that one's a wee bit out of order, but the reason I've shown you a bird's nest in a cabinet is just to illustrate the difference between a bird's nest in a tree and a bird's nest in a cabinet, which is what the collector's job is, to get it and then display it in some way. Even without looking at the detail, I'm inspired by the general feeling of the anatomical museum spaces. And I love these old black and white photographs where it looks incredibly jumbled up. This photograph I took at the W.D. Trotter Museum across the road in 1981. I was fascinated, of course, by what is in that museum, but generally I enjoyed the general fixtures and fittings and the sense of place. Sadly, the potted plants, I think, have moved on. Also the tradition of installation art and folk medicine. And probably above all, the curiosity we have about each other. My role, I think, as a visual artist who uses anatomical imagery is to invite the viewer to confront the complexities of the human body in relation to themselves. What is under our skin and what is on our mind? This person's showing us what's under his skin. And this person's carrying theirs around. This person, I think, is very proud of their skin. They can use it as a shawl. I thank Terence Doyle for inviting me to do this presentation and understand my audience may include medical people who don't need to know anything about the sorts of things I'm interested in to do their work. Please forgive the lack of dates, timelines, etc. of the images I will show. My intention is to bombard you with what I think is a fascinating array of wonderful pictures, which have played an important role in how I make my work, and I hope you like looking at them. A sort of around the world in 80 days type of presentation, or maybe around the world in 40. I enjoy a play on words, and I like the thought that to know what is inside our own bodies, we need to look inside someone else, like these two people chatting away and showing each other what's inside them. And this one who's looking inside someone else, but feeling inside, but doesn't seem to want to look. And these two are just sitting casually. This figure on the right is an example of a flap, lifted up like a flat book. That's why we can't see the face. We have common language which includes anatomical references in our everyday life. We have all drunk from a cup with a lip. Our combs have teeth. Our shoes have tongues. Our beds have heads. Needles, potatoes, and storms have eyes. Nerves of steel, pain in the neck. I believe we are all interested in each other, interested in people and what makes them tick. This is just an example of people being interested in each other. It's surprising how hardwired we are to see people and subconsciously read references into the things we see. We can see something and our mind turns it into a face, like these squares that make up the portrait of Abraham Lincoln, or my quilt showing a self-portrait as a patient from a very unflattering angle. And that's the colour version of the quilt. Other times it may simply be tools talking to each other. This could well be why there is a man on the moon, in the moon. The layperson's knowledge of the human body is often anecdotal. An interest in the body inevitably extends into medicine. It is through the care of the body and dealing with ill health that a lot of the layperson's knowledge comes from. That knowledge may be no further informed than adding together all of what we've ever been to the doctor about with what other people have told us that they have been to the doctor about. Myths, symbolism, and allegory are important in whole human life, and they can affect beliefs and behaviour. There's just some images of doctors you might go and see. The next images loosely illustrate doctors helping patients, including this plague doctor with his big beak mask, transplanting a lower limb, a 14th century salt bath for rashes. The patient begins a visit to the doctor by telling a tale about what it is that is wrong. The doctor refers to the patient's tale as the medical history. To tell that tale, the patient may well draw on symbolism and metaphors in language which has evolved to the point of view of universal understanding. Perhaps it's something felt in the bones, a need to recharge the batteries, or a nervous breakdown. I can't remember what the next picture is. Oh yeah, that's just another medical. We also use language referring to parts of the body in a very natural way, so that when we use those words in our language, there's no misunderstanding of what is meant. There are those people who've got good things, like that person we know with a good eye, or the musician with a good ear, or someone with a good brain, a sight for sore eyes, down in the mouth, an ear to the ground, turn up one's nose, stomach tied in knots, get under someone's skin, a knee-jerk reaction. Don't lose heart, pick someone's brains. Head on your shoulders, catch someone's eye, 3 mouths to feed. I'm all ears. A nose out of joint, to have a thick skin. And that saying we might remember from childhood, I cross my heart and hope to die. And when you say to a friend who's also about 7 that you really mean it. But I think when I was at primary school, we said, cross my heart and poke a needle in my eye, which I think is worse, but I don't think anyone ever did it. I'm going to briefly focus on the heart as an example of the symbolism of a single body part. Well, that's another medical doctor helping a patient. This is a subject dear to my heart. I will make this presentation today from the bottom of my heart, and I apologise for not knowing it off by heart. In 1967, a middle-aged man lay in a hospital bed awaiting surgery. His pale face would be splashed across every newspaper and every television screen of almost every country in the world. He was the first person to receive a human heart transplant. Interestingly, for years previous to this, corneas and kidneys had been successfully transplanted, blood and plasma transfused, and artificial hips and heart valves implanted. Yet, the transplant of a heart captured the imagination. The surgeon had somehow strayed into mythic landscape, the heart being thought of as the vital centre of one's being. I'm just going to show a variety of images of the heart they're hard to see on the old ones, but interestingly. The wife of a heart transplant recipient is recorded as feeling great relief that her husband still loved her and their children with his new heart. Such is the strength of belief in the heart's symbolism. These images include a range of anatomical images over a vast period of time, some more accurate than others. I've included Frau Minnie's depiction of torturing her beloved's heart in 19 different ways, painted in 1485. Also, this fascinating image of the heart of Christ viewed through the wound in his side, painted in the Netherlands in 1405. I'm just now going to do a sort of an overview of anatomical illustration. From the first primitive crude sketches to the sophisticated scientific imaging of today, the complexity and mystery of the human body has fired people's imagination. The first scientific studies of the human body appeared during the Middle Ages. Medieval illustrators generally used a series of 5 or 6 drawings, each depicting a different system of the body: osseous, nervous, muscular, venous, arterial, and sometimes the reproductive system as seen in the pregnant woman. The schematic model was generally represented in the squatting position. I have included this interesting and unusual image, a depiction of a body split in half, opened symmetrically like a book. This is from an English treatise called The Art of the Physician and the Surgeon, published in 1412. Between the time of these early scientific studies of the human body and the accuracies ushered in during the Renaissance period are centuries of beautiful but not so accurate anatomical studies, a selection of which I will show you now. I know that these people who made these are generally wood engravings or woodcuts, and they were printed to be in atlases or educational books. This one is a highlight, I think, the 16th century ginger man demonstrating veins of the head and neck, and the eye illustration by the Swiss anatomist, botanist, and physician Caspar Bowen. People would have worked in those workshops, somewhere I think I would like to have been, and they put in things that they themselves liked. Like, I think that they gave skeletons a smile, and they gave a stance, and I don't know, sort of an attitude. There are a lot of inaccuracies, obviously, but they look beautiful. This is a highlight for me are those flip or flat books. Anatomical flat books are anatomical diagrams of superimposed flaps, which translate onto paper the concept of dissection, mimicking the progressive unveiling of the body. And I particularly like this because it has a dark background for a change. It's a Persian anatomical chart. Medical illustrations or charts were an important way to study anatomy. Just see what the next one is there. The medieval style of representation of the human body is fascinating to return to from our viewpoint. Our viewpoint has so much accurate information readily available. It's an insight into what appeared to be important to the understanding of the body, then based on such limited knowledge. I say we have so much accurate information readily available today, which doesn't mean to say every man and his dog spends any time at all studying that information. I will always return to my emphasis of the layperson's knowledge. If I was to ask everybody here now to get a pen and a piece of paper and illustrate a series of 5 or 6 drawings, each representing a different system of the body, we would probably come up with some beautiful diagrams based on that subconscious knowledge of how things are. If we just got a pen and said, and then the bone of the arm's there, and that's there, and the hand goes like that, we might end up like some of those early diagrams without being given any time to check reference books or look up the internet. I imagine what people would draw on those diagrams would bear some similarity to what each other drew. Yeah, I think I've just got a lot of these. I like the fact the figures are in the landscape. I like the fact they all look alive. And I like the fact that they don't seem to be aware of the fact that they've been cut open, which is the under the skin part of the topic, title of my topic. I've slipped in here 3 images of a different context to anatomical imagery. Firstly, anatomy as theatre. In the 17th and 18th centuries, human dissections were performed to educate and entertain students as well as the general public. The anatomical cabinet, which was a fanciful way of mounting a display. I'll go back, and these type of things, they always have a dog, and they often, even if they're doing a dissection of a human, there's often the skeletons of the other animals around, or like horses and possibly even an angel up the top. I think the dogs are there because they're hungry. The continued study of gross anatomy inspired woodcuts and engravings that show the body in more detail, where a growing emphasis for detail culminated in tremendous progress for the study of the human form in the 15th century. This is what I've got now. I'm going to go quickly through a selection of my favourites, and I just call them collectively the show-offs, as they're very eager to show us what they've got under their skin. And they're smiling usually. If they're not a wood cut, they're a wood engraving, and if they're not a wood engraving, they're metal engraving. These ones are quite show-offy, I think. It's the look on the faces, the casual stance, that type of thing I like. Or this person looks like she's in a real hurry. And like, do you have to look now? Because I'm busy. This person's having to use their mouth to help hold up the flap. This person has not got much left. This is another woman who looks like she's in a bit of a hurry. You'll see the clear spot where the flap's open, and the next picture looks like it's a different thing, but it's the same thing with the flap closed. Yeah, I like those flap books. This person, I'm calling them the show-offs, but he looks like he'd rather not be doing it. And this person's been showing off for so long they've had to have a sit down. I think that's when I think of people now going to the gym and trying to have the biggest muscles. I mean, who would win, this one or this one? I think they're both wrong, probably, of what muscles are, but that's Hercules, so that's fair enough. There's an endless supply of people showing off, even children. And I like this selection of skeletons, all enjoying life. Despite finding themselves so depleted, they're still managing to do things like pray, go for runs, contemplating what death might be by looking at the skull of another skeleton, reading, or maybe just peeking under the curtain, I'm not sure, going hunting. And I think this is particularly funny when you think of dicing with death, where the skeleton is playing dice with somebody. This is for comparative. That's the skull of a horse beside a child. The Renaissance produced two artists of genius, Leonardo da Vinci and Andreas Vesalius. Each produced monumental studies of the human form. This work is by Leonardo. He lived from 1452 to 1519. His studies of the human body were the first real scientific studies. His method of schematic observation has set the standard upon which modern science is based. He is known for his detailed dissections and meticulous drawings of the human body. Leonardo's anatomical work was centuries ahead of its time, with some findings not fully appreciated until imaging technologies confirmed their accuracy. His work is recognized as groundbreaking. And Andreas Vesalius lived from 1514 to 1564. His work has been dubbed the Bible of Anatomy. His most famous work is titled The 7 Books on the Structure of the Body. Within his 7 books, there are examples of a body being reduced from merely skinned to skeletal in stages, held up by ropes on a picturesque hill somewhere in Italy. I've been fascinated by his posing of cadavers and landscapes, and also by the technique of a woodcut, being able to show such detail. I can sense in the bodies being illustrated by Vesalius that the nature of the individual was still there. A severed head, dissected head could have an alive, if somewhat disinterested face. I would like to remind people of, or alert them to, a comprehensive lecture by Mariana Moffat in November of last year titled Andreas Vesalius, the Father of Modern Medicine, in which she draws our attention to the fact that the University of Otago Special Collections Library has an original second edition of Vesalius's Fabric of the Human Body, published in Basel in 1555. Her lecture is on the archive if you missed it. At the time Leonardo and Vesalius were working, they were explorers of unknown territory of the human form. They were driven by a passion for knowledge. They were also concerned about the precarious nature of human existence. The more they could observe people, the more they could understand them. Although not always acknowledged in any general histories of anatomists, I would like to introduce Anna Morandi, who lived in Bologna, Italy in the 18th century. She's known as the Lady Anatomist. I'm very inspired by her self-portrait here, made with wax and fabric, where she portrays herself dissecting a brain. She worked making wax models for university study and also held anatomy workshops in her home. She became a port of call for English people on their grand tour of Europe. Anna Morandi aspired to accuracy. These are some of her wax models of eyes. And I just rather like that leg all by itself with a beautiful mount. Her rival, who was a man called Lissy, who was favoured for a university position, was also making models at the same time, illustrating inaccurate, idealized figures. You can fool most of the people most of the time, but I'm sure many of you looking at this image will spot the inaccuracies. From what I've read, not all of the bones are necessarily human. He articulated some bones to make up these skeletons, and he wanted to emphasize the fact that a male figure was superior to a female figure. After mentioning Leonardo da Vinci and Vesalius, I will note historical references since then. The anatomical illustrators that followed in their wake grew out of creative efforts in the fields of both science and art. Beautiful atlases of human form were published, scientific anatomies sensitive to an artistic ideal, and illustrators began to deal with colour. An anatomical atlas known by everyone, even if some people muddle it with a TV program of the same name, is Gray's Anatomy. Originally published in 1855, the October 2020 edition remains a standard edition. Everyone has heard of Gray, but few could name the illustrator off the top of their head. He was Henry Van Dyke Carter. The work is monumental. It was a partnership of sorts, but it was Gray who commissioned Carter to do the illustrations. Carter had a long life. He went on to work as a doctor, mainly in India, and Gray died of smallpox, aged 34. This marks a point where an anatomical imagery, to my eye, becomes very accurate, made for a specific purpose. So I make a U-turn for myself, and I go back from this point to the style I love and continue to be inspired by. This Gray's Anatomy imagery. I've included some random images of things I particularly like to share. Like this one is the wound man. He's a surgical diagram which first appeared in European medical manuscripts in the 14th and 15th centuries. The illustration acts as a one-stop shop to read the annotations alongside the image to find cures, or what you should do when this thing happens, when an arrow goes there or you're hit with a rock there. The writing tells the doctor what to do, or the surgeon. The wound man continues to be referenced now in popular culture. In plastic surgery imagery, this image is from a 1597 treatise of Tagliacozzi, an Italian surgeon from Bologna, illustrating rhinoplasty technique, where a graft of skin is taken from the forearm and encouraged to grow over the missing nose. This is a model crafted for the New Zealand Medical Corps in 1917, showing reconstructive surgery techniques. It was made by the New Zealand model maker Thomas Herbert Kelsey. It is made of wax and wood and can be found in the National Army Museum in London. Dentistry. This is a medieval image I just love. It's a dentist holding a string of teeth as he pulls them out one by one with pliers. From an English encyclopedia published in the mid-14th century. From where we look, it is easy to imagine toothache being an awful thing in the past, especially if you let a vision of these little teeth worms get into your mind. This one I just find interesting. It's just, I'm not going to say too much other than it's titled Dissection of the Thorax. It's made in 1345, and I think it looks like an embrace, don't you? I'm fascinated by the usual anatomical images from the past, but occasionally I come across something that I would say is most unusual. This is a wood engraving by an unknown German engraver in the mid-15th century, and it is a depiction of a human sundial. You can see the numbers to tell the time written on the legs. And another sort of sideways interesting thing I like are these wax figures of women called anatomical Venuses. They're life-sized, called dissectable because layers and layers can come off. They've been made with real hair, glass eyes, and often with a string of pearls. They were made in the 18th century to teach the general public about human anatomy. This is James Legge. He was a murderer. In 1801, his body, at the request of 3 artists from London's Royal Academy, was nailed to a cross to settle a long-standing question about whether artistic representations of the crucifixion were anatomically correct. His body was flayed and cast so that the musculature could be studied in detail. This very unusual anatomical thing is called, I'm not sure if I pronounce it correctly, Madame de Coudray's machine. Angela de Coudray was charged by Louis XIV with traveling around France to save babies and combat population decline. Her mannequins were made from real pelvic bones held by metal rods on a wooden stand, upholstered in canvas, padded with cotton, and lined with flesh-coloured leather. Accessories included a doll, which could be bent into various positions. She made hundreds of these sets and empowered thousands of women. And my last unusual image, which I know is popular with a lot of people, is the Dermatome Man, a favourite exhibit of many people in Dunedin. Maybe because he's got a tail, kind of. I'll just talk a little bit about folk medicine history and quackery, as I enjoy the imagery and language in them, and I do know they're different to each other. If I was to think of what I like aesthetically when I think of a pharmacy, it wouldn't be the bargain chemist on George Street that springs to mind. It's more likely this person who's like a travelling pharmacist. I prefer old illustrations, and I find them inspiring when I might like to add text to an image. I think of folk medicine as a general term which covers a wide variety of medical, traditional, or superstitious practices which have certain features in common. Most illnesses of a serious nature seem to arrive out of the blue, and they pass from person to person in an unseen, mysterious way. The association of the forces of good and evil with illnesses and disease is common to all societies and lasted for a long time, even up to the so-called civilized world. I'm just going to leave that image on while I talk about this. This is an artwork of mine I've called Apothecary, and it's a cabinet with paper mache medicine bottles or little medicine things. Like there's I hope you can see what they are. And I haven't made any of them up. Over the centuries, almost any characteristic that's a little out of the ordinary has provided enough power to make that individual someone who can cure. You didn't need to go to medical school if you were the seventh son of a seventh son, or a baby born with a cow, strangers who met at crossroads, etc. Even a dead person can work cures. For example, powdered skulls were once considered very good for epilepsy. The wholeness of a person's body is traditionally regarded as having a special power in itself. Care is always taken to prevent bits and pieces of it falling into the wrong hands. There is a system of natural healing called doctrine of signatures based on like cures like. For example, plants with heart-shaped leaves are good for the heart. Yellow plants cure liver conditions such as jaundice. Many names for well-known herbs are derived from this system of medical law, such as heartsease, liverwort, spleenwort, and eyebright. Another system of natural healing is called sympathy. An example is the use of a red flannel for rheumatism. The warmth of the colour is to convey heat to the joint. Another example of this custom is going around the house, opening all of the windows and doors when a woman goes into labour, as if the free flow of air suggests an easy birth for the baby. Alongside the system of sympathy is the system of transference, the idea of fobbing off what you've got to someone or something else. It could involve wearing spiders in little boxes around your neck, selling your warts, or driving a nail into an oak tree to cure toothache. This image, a satirical print, is amusing to me. I like the style, the colours and the humour. You'll see there are such things available as opening pills for members of parliament, young husband pills for widows, scandal drops for old maids, pills for forgetfulness for contractors, which might still be around. Phrenology was a 19th century pseudoscience that claimed to determine a person's character and mental abilities by examining the bumps on their head, on their skull. It has been discredited, but was once a popular and influential concept. It is a good introduction to quackery, which is essentially a dishonest practice claiming to have special knowledge and skills typical in the field of medicine. You might wonder why I would look into this sort of area of folk medicine or quackery. I refer again to my lay person's position, and I find it fascinating what people will believe. And I like to learn from the descriptive language, and I'm often inspired by the imagery that goes with the story. I particularly enjoyed making a series of heads based on the popular phrenology heads, and I brought 5 in with me there. You can read this is a poster to do with the things on the bump of the head. Like anyone with a head like this will be positively selfish, tricky and deceitful, and an unreliable husband. Things like you feel sorry for people if they've had a funny shaped head, and you see a diagram like that saying avoid them. In a similar vein, I'm as fascinated as the next teenage boy in monsters. I enjoy the illustrations of medieval monsters and plausible beasts. And then I became aware of and intrigued by examples of extremes in reality, which is a sound lesson in diversity. My artworks are generally paintings or objects made of paper mache. Paper mache has a proud tradition in the history of model making, and these are some examples of paper mache anatomical models. What I like about this type of model of an ear is the mount, the furniture that goes with it. And obviously an eye. These ones were made in 19th century France. Life-sized and articulated and able to be taken apart. So I'm going to show a selection of images of my work. This doesn't look at all interesting, but those are little things I've made out of paper mache, and this is the same things painted. So when you look at images of my work, which is coming up now, I'll let you decide if I'm an artist or I might actually be a magpie. This is a good one to show because a lot of work in one picture, and it returns to my introductory words, the blogs. This was an installation called The Blogs, where I created a room which I thought of as a cross between a medical museum or a living room of someone who just happens to collect things that look like that. So there's two photos, one from either side. All of the painting things are to do with an anatomy. This shows my quilt in the background and a large medicine bottle I made, which was particularly made for an exhibition about the First World War. So it has imagery of, fixing soldiers who've been injured, and my granddaughter for scale. This painting is done in 1990. It's titled, "Tears Are the Only Socially Acceptable Bodily Secretion." And yesterday I took it to pack and send. It's going to be in an exhibition next month in Wellington at the New Zealand Portrait Gallery. This is a portrait of me with my family, my parents in the background, and my three sisters. The anatomical reference here is the linking hearts. I showed this in a gallery in Dowling Street last month, and it was the first time it had been in a gallery ever, even though I painted in 1987. I filled a small gallery with a whole lot of skulls, obsessively making lots of them, and this was titled An Elephant in the Room. This painting is really hard to photograph because it's got plastic on top of it, but you know what I mean. It's the one in the foyer. This was commissioned by George Griffiths, Dunedin Identity. He was a journalist and a historian. He commissioned me to do a painting about sound, incidental sounds around the city, as well as music. Music was of great interest to him. And I titled it Resonance, but I noticed that on the plaque he called it like music to attending ears, which I'd never heard of, but I think it comes from Shakespeare, someone told me. And I thought, oh, maybe I won't show that because you can see it anyway in the foyer and it hasn't got anything anatomical. And then I remembered the clouds are the bones of the ear. This, I don't usually, or I practically never would paint a still life. But this year I had the misfortune of having ultrasounds and various other things which confirmed I had a rock garden inside me. So this is a floral tribute to my rock garden. This painting, it sort of links to my history and folk medicine and saying I'll do it myself. I, quite a lot of years ago, had a catheter ablation to stop a racing heart. So those red things are like an ECG. And there's the foxglove, which can be used for healing matters of the heart. The hawk moth with its little skull, and me holding a pretty pathetic plant, saying, "Leave it to me, I'll fix myself." But it obviously was a big thing on my mind at the time. This work is titled Floriculture. This is a work I made in 1981, and it's a life-size, more or less a copy, I suppose, of those fold-out mannequins. This has nothing in particular anatomically, but it has an example of an old surgical instrument. I've got a lovely book from 1905, which is a catalogue from which you can order. You could then order surgical instruments, and that's a rubber thing, and it's helping to give this patient who's me oxygen. And the title is something to do with trying to paint at home, struggling against old man's beard, but aided by oxygen. And the landscape at the bottom is sort of Otago Harbour. This is actually a very small work, so it's funny to see it large, but it's based on an engraving of a woman with smallpox. I've used it for my own purpose and given it the title, No Amount of Material Wealth. This is another variation of like the blog's installation in a different place, in a different way, with some new works added. This is my version of the Wound Man. It's a self-portrait titled, I'm Not Scared of Anything, or Afraid. This is an example of a medicine bottle I've made. It's about that large, paper mache. The name of the medicine is Panacea. It doesn't have any specific instructions like 3 times a day or take before food or with water. It just says take it. This portrait was done this year, and it's also based on my rock garden, and it's titled Seeing is Believing. This is a portrait of a child depicting a sickness. It's chicken pox, even though more than one person have pointed out to me they're ducks. But he has got chicken pox. Now, this is the image I thought I would finish on. I don't have any idea what the time is, but I thought I would finish with this. I painted this painting this year, and it's titled, You Can Be Sick and Not Know It. But then I thought, maybe I'll choose a different one. So I've decided to finish on this one, which is called, I'm Not Going to Speak to You Ever Again. And I wrote something about what I was going to say there. And I have an ulterior motive, and I chose it because I hope it'll put you right off asking me any questions. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Could I ask you to go back to the painting that is in the foyer? Yeah. That one, yeah.
Yeah.
Would you mind just stepping through each of the figures and just talk about what you were thinking about when you were painting them, or
Okay.
just ramble?
Well,
because
okay.
a lot of people will go down after this lecture and look at
Yeah.
that painting.
Yes. This figure on the right is Eliza. She's like my great-great-great-grandmother, and she represents the sounds of nature, which is why I've put those birds, a barking dog, just things that are out in nature. This is a child is based on my son Vivian, and it's children noisily being noisy or singing, or, you know, ring-a-ring-a-rosy might be what I've written on there. That's the town hall clock, just to give it the placement of being in Dunedin, because George Griffiths, the man who commissioned it, wanted it to be specifically the sounds of Dunedin. That's the rescue helicopter, because he said any sounds. He even liked a stick, you know, going along a corrugated fence, or any sounds he could hear in Dunedin. And I've never done a painting that big before or since. And I squashed everything on there, used it with my usual style, which is small. That is my daughter, Gwendolyn, and it's wearing a Pokemon kind of I think, character, because that was what was in at that time. This person represents a choir. His tie there is like a choir boy, and he's got a drum. And on the drum is a copy of Colin McCann's landscape of Otago Peninsula to once again give it a sense of place. This was more organised music. This is like this is the Dunedin Town Hall, and this is like there's a group of musicians playing traditional instruments. This figure has a harp over his shoulder, and that instrument and the violin. Anything that you want to ask? Sound waves, and all of these are these circles of sound waves, and all of those little things are notations that, not the note, but when a composer's writing, they're all little notations to music. That'll just be a road with a noisy car. I can't see it that well. Can you see anything else? Oh, yeah, and the keyboard. Oh, yeah, the frame is a keyboard. That's right.
What was the title you gave it? And you can explain why.
Resonance.
Resonance.
Yeah, just like this, you just can hear the sound of something, was what I was thinking of. I thought it covered a lot of different sounds. You just happened to hear a sound anywhere. But yeah, for some reason he gave it a different title. And there's an aeroplane up there flying over. Yeah. So I think I'm lucky that it's here in the hospital, because he commissioned it and it was in his own home. And after he died, his daughter donated it to the hospital. So it could have just been tucked away and no one ever saw it. But people say to me, I was at the hospital and I saw that painting. It's quite a good position.
And who was the person that commissioned it? I'm not familiar with him.
George Griffiths.
Who is he?
Otago Heritage Books publisher. And he was a writer with the Otago Daily Times, I think. And he wrote some historical Otago and Southland histories in particular. And he had that little place like a temple by the garage on the one way.
Say that again?
Like a little temple building beside the garage on the one way going north, set back. That was Otago Heritage Books.
Oh.
And he turned it into a bit of a music museum.
He published Dr. James Ning's sort of monumental book on Chinese and Otago.
Yes.
So where do you go to, Nicola, to find all these pictures and everything?
Just mostly books.
But
Yeah,
where do you find the books? Do you go online? Do you...
Oh yeah, I can do that. Or people recommend them. I've got some books I've had for years and years, but I'm still on the lookout. I think anatomy is quite a popular topic. There's new books. Some of the same pictures are in all of them, but you know, I'd like to go visiting the museums of Europe one day and actually see some like those Venuses. Have you seen them? Yeah, I'd like to do that kind of thing.
In the same way that you've gone through the painting, would you like to go through the heads on the table?
The what? Oh, right, yes. This is The Worst Man in the World. He's from a book about people. He had that many tattoos on him. He was an English man who worked on the docks, travelled the world. I had to make up all the tattoos on the back, but he's in more than one book referred to as the worst man in the world. This is called the systematist, person who just puts everything into order, which was one of the first heads I made out of that thing. This one, sometimes things are universal, sometimes things are personal. Considering nowadays with people who've got a lot of body adornment compared to the maybe 1977, I had an AFS sister my age live with us for a year, and we thought it would be quite a nice idea if we got a little second piercing on one ear. I was really growled at and told I had a head like a sieve, and I've never forgotten that. So this is a head like a sieve. This is sort of inspired by Mexican decoration, and it's called Dead But Not Forgotten. And I think when people are trying to be a bit mean, maybe about someone who's very intelligent, they might say that person's a brain box. So this is a brain box. I've made quite a lot more of those. I like them.
Any other questions?
I've got one more slide. I just remembered. It's like time to tidy up and go home.
It's wonderful, Nicola. Thank you.
That would be a good one to end on.